Good afternoon or good morning for those of you in the Americas, and thanks for joining us on the first Netbiscuits webinar for 2015. My name is Duncan Clark, and I'm Head of Global Research here at Netbiscuits. So there's loads going on in the marketing world, and most of all the rise of mobile and analytics is creating some really exciting times. So over the next 45 minutes or so, I wanted to look at these two themes and then map out what the combination of these trends means for marketers throughout the rest of the year. First of all though, before we launch into the main deck, I just wanted to point out, obviously, we'd like to make this as interactive as possible, so please feel free to drop any questions that come to mind into the chat box, and there will be a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. Also, I wanted to point out that the webinar is being recorded, so there will be a link provided so that you can access the content later. Okay, first of all, a quick look at the agenda then. I'd like to start with what's really the most important part of the equation. So this is the consumer, and more specifically, the changing consumer landscape. So I'll briefly paint a picture of where we're at right now and where we're heading next, particularly in terms of the mobile market. I then want to turn our attention to how the rise of mobile provides the ideal backdrop for content marketing, which has its natural home in the multi-screen, multi-platform mobile world. And finally, if we're investing in content marketing, then we need to measure how successful it is. So in this third section, we'll explore some of the ways in which we can measure customer engagement and check whether our content marketing activities are delivering against company objectives. And as I mentioned before, we'll end the session today with questions and answers. Okay, let's take a look first of all then at the amorphous world of the consumer. So the changing consumer landscape, the trends that we're seeing in mobile, and of course as well the rise of the multi-screen journey. So I think we're already feeling the consequences of a mobile world which never stands still. And just where we got used to treating the market in terms of tablets and smartphones, we find a whole new category emerging. So that's the awkwardly named phablet segment. This is the phone and tablet hybrid device. So on the chart here, we can see that it's come from 10% of traffic as measured on our platform back in April 2014, and we'll predict that it'll be as much as a quarter of total smartphone traffic by around April or May this year. So that's a significant shift that we're talking about. Now, the somewhat clunky name aside, the emergence of this category is great news for marketers. So there's more screen space to showcase all the superb content that you're producing. And it shows as well that consumers want a decent screen to consume quality content. Also, given that conversion rates on tablets are better than conversion rates on smartphones, we should expect the move to larger screens to have a positive impact on engagement as well. But this blurring of the smartphone and tablet categories also raises other considerations. Interestingly, although tablets are mobile devices, they're predominantly used at home, while smartphones are generally used in a bigger variety of contexts. So if people use phablets in place of having both a smartphone and a tablet, and this is something we're already seeing a lot of in Asia at the moment, it makes knowing the context in which the device is being used more important than ever. I think another factor to consider is that consumers will have more devices generally at their disposal. So that means the likelihood that they'll start their interaction with your brand on one device and then quite naturally switch to another device is higher than ever. So more and more, the multi-screen journey will be something that consumers undertake quite naturally without thinking. And often, the consumer finds that that switch is far from seamless. Now, what's even worse is when consumers are forced down this route, which is also something that still happens far too often. In the second half of last year, we undertook a survey of 6,000 consumers across 6 countries to find out more about their experiences on the mobile web. Now, this was the Netbiscuits People's Web Report. And in that, one of the questions we asked consumers as part of the survey overall was, have you ever reverted to a laptop or PC after not being able to use your mobile device to finish the task you wanted? Now, sadly, 94% of respondents said that they had done this. And just under half said it was something that they did often or very often. Now, the responses to this question varied according to the device being used, but even on Apple, so the most widespread in the base, 43% of consumers said that they had to do this often or very often. So it means that there are plenty of broken multi-screen journeys taking place, and it rises actually to as much as 54% amongst BlackBerry users. So broken multi-screen journeys is a big problem in a highly mobilized world. But there's another, potentially even bigger concern. Consumers' expectations are running ahead of the market. And here's an example. We asked our same 6,000 consumers if they would enjoy using a smartwatch to surf websites. Now, given that watches are seen as timepieces and that there are only perhaps one or two watches that even offer this type of full web functionality, it's quite a visionary question to ask. But even so, still 37% of consumers said that they would enjoy this experience. So consumers are imagining features and functionalities before they're readily available on the market. And in the pictures on the bottom of this slide here, you'll recognize the American rapper will.i.am sporting the Pulse Smart wristband. This is connected to the whole fashionology concept, which means that there will be an explosion of all sorts of different products in this space, some of course as well with larger screens. Now, smart wristbands will certainly not be everyone's cup of tea, but tastes are personal and manufacturers almost certainly will want to capitalize on every corner of the market. So expect an even more fragmented landscape and expect the complexities of multi-screen to get a whole load tougher. Now, this is great news for the vendors. It's also great news for innovation, but for marketers, it fires a warning shot. Consumers are likely already today to be expecting to use features and functionalities or interact with your brand in ways that are currently not possible or supported by your organization. And with the Internet of Things on top of that, so think of the connected home and smart TV, games consoles connected to the web and so on, this is set to exacerbate the complexity of the multi-screen journey. So one thing's for sure, we'll never see the days of single screen engagement again. It means that your paid ads, videos, emails and so on all have multiple user experience requirements, and traditional modes of advertising are over. So this line of three, the desktop, phone, tablet, when we add in wearables and the Internet of Things, is about to become a line of 20. So it's something to prepare for now. And also I think with the rise of wearables, this shows that consumers are integrating more intimately with technology than ever before. So it means interaction, more interaction with higher expectations of personalization and a rethink around the user experience. So I wanted to turn to that now. The implications of multi-screen can already be seen in user experience interfaces, and this is especially true in the design world. In the early days, we were blessed with skeuomorphic principles as Apple eased our transition into the digital era by putting magazines in little wooden bookcases or providing us with organizers that visually resembled the 1980s must-have filofaxes. But skeuomorphic design died with iOS 7, and rightly so. Nobody knows what a filofax is nowadays, so why make your organizer app look like one? Meanwhile, at the time, Microsoft was busy optimizing its Windows operating system for the multi-screen era, and it was really the first to step into a radical design change with its flat mobile UI. But this first attempt at change wasn't also without its issues. For instance, what's clickable and what's not, what's more or less important information, those kind of things weren't always clear to the user. So then in 2014, Google released brand guidelines that aimed to bring one consistent design that spans devices across mobile, desktop and beyond. They called it material design, and the beauty of material design is captured in this quotation from their developer blog site. In material design, surface and shadow establish a physical structure to explain what can be touched and what can move. Content is front and center, using principles of modern print design. Motion is meaningful, clarifying relationships and teaching with delightful details. So in this then, we've got a solid theory around how to make the most of the small screen space and organization. We see things like the card design, so the swiping mechanism of which makes it great for the touchscreen experience. And next up, we'll start seeing parallax scrolling, which offers the opportunity to scroll through a website with a background that moves at a different speed than the foreground, creating a really nice feeling of depth within 2D design. Now, all of this means that the world of how you create content has already been changed by mobile. So it means that how you create the content for mobile, in terms of what you create and the experiences you offer, also has to change. And that's perfect for content marketing. Okay, so in this section, we'll briefly cover off the implications of mobile on the content marketing piece before we explore how this comes together with analytics to create a wealth of new and exciting opportunities for marketers. First up though, a brief history. As we know, content marketing has always been present, but it really caught on as a pure marketing concept from around the mid to late 1990s. Now, it came off the back of being more customer-centric, so that's focusing on providing the customer with what they want, and then when we throw in the multi-screen implications, how they want it. So the expectations of personalization are growing. But get this right, and so the theory goes, everything else should follow along. Customers are much more likely to behave in a way that has a positive impact for your brand. However, since the 1990s, the internet has become increasingly heavily saturated with advertising. This advertising really continued to shout messages of why a product or brand was great, so being noticed becomes tough, and consumers start to become banner blind. Now, at the same time, and also as search engines grew in importance, brands started to realize that customers wanted knowledge as much as they wanted a product. Most of their searches were looking for answers, a fact which remains true today, or if they were shopping, they were looking for reviews. And if the brand wasn't there to provide them with a solution or entertainment, well, they would find it another way. And there's another trend too. People want to share and discuss content. They have far more opportunities to do this, and do this instantly with mobile devices everywhere today. So we've had a social revolution. The consumer is looking for real-time recommendations at a level they never did before. And all of this calls for content marketing. Now, if we add into the mix as well the fact that that search and banner ads were not optimized for mobile in the beginning, it's meant that if you wanted to hit mobile, you really needed content. So there are three things taking place. Number one, first of all, the consumer has become pickier about the content that they are prepared to engage with. Number two, they will share good experiences on social media platforms. And number three, they can access from any device at any time on mobile. So all of this adds up to the user experience being inextricably linked to content. So brands set out to create a content strategy frameworks. They knew they had to provide value content, not just that product message. The content they provide needs to be educating, inspiring, it needs to be entertaining and engaging for customers, giving them relevant content in a variety of forms. Essentially, and to use a cliche here, brands could become publishers or producers able to create content in the form of things like how-to information, opinion pieces, entertaining videos, and even things like viral campaigns. However, as we know, creating content is a tricky business. It requires a lot of energy, creativity, and resources to maintain the steady stream and continually be heard. So unlike advertising, anyone can create content, and some of the best content is often free, created by individuals, not necessarily created by brands or multi-million enterprises. And on top of this, marketers don't always know if their content is reaching the right people, how relevant it is, or ultimately, if it's helping them reach their brand objectives. And this is where I think content analytics, content marketing analytics really comes into play. We need to capture the mobile context, evaluate the contexts out there, and provide recommendations in order to deliver the right content at the right time for the right device. Now this ties into another big focus, particularly in the field of content marketing, personalization of content. This is absolutely inevitable, and with that, privacy becomes so much less of an issue if the content is deemed relevant by the customer. Now, personalization, I think, will become a big point of differentiation, especially in the wake of increased mobile and wearable technology being right at the fingertips of consumers. So, a quick summary. The fusion of mobile and social spheres have meant an increase in the need for that value content, as well as establishing really engaged audiences. Conversely, it has meant a decrease in the need for traditional brand, product, and price advertising. And we're seeing this as well in how customers behave. Again, the answers from our People's Web report indicate how we're seeing the end of brand loyalty as we knew it. No one cares if your brand has been a high street name for 200 years or more, but they do care about whether they get the content they were looking for right at their point of need. It's what Forrester referred to frequently as the mobile moment. They care whether they can complete the task that they want to complete on the platform that they're using. Now, if that's not up to scratch, they then very quickly go elsewhere, and this happens an awful lot on the mobile web. So 96% of our sample 6,000 said that they had been unable to complete what they wanted to on their mobile device. Now, more than a quarter said that this happened very often. and 91% go to a competitor site as a result of that. On the other hand, if you get the user experience right on mobile, you get rewarded. 80% of people say that they have recommended a brand based on the mobile website experience, and more importantly, 29% say they do this often or very often. So these are very encouraging figures. If you get the content marketing strategy right, consumers will engage, they will recommend you, and your traffic will go up. So getting it right on mobile comes down to ensuring that content is never separated from the user experience. The user experience is connected to the screen and where it is, so location information, the speed of connection, so here we're talking about things like a customer's bandwidth, and the time of day that someone is visiting, as well as many other factors that may impact how they react to certain pieces of content. So in order to get the experience as right and personalized as possible, all the information, all available information, needs to be considered as a potential. It's a potential for influencing how consumers behave. However, within that, the balance of trust is absolutely vital. Now, in the world of marketing, gaining and keeping trust is a hard balancing act. And here's an example. If you ask people whether they would abandon a site if it asks for location information, a large proportion will say that yes, they would. It's not quite 50-50, but it's a large proportion here nonetheless. If, on the other hand, you ask exactly the same group of people whether they would share their location in order to enjoy additional services, the result becomes overwhelmingly more positive. The point is, customers are naturally skeptical, but they are willing to use their personal information as a bargaining chip if they feel they will get something of benefit in return. So, the consumer has spoken. If you get it right, they will give you their information and they will engage with you. And also, with the amount of data that's out there, in the customer's eyes, there are no excuses for getting it wrong. Customers simply expect brands to use all the detail that's available to them in order to create an exceptional experience for them. And not all people will want to share the same levels of information, nor will they be willing to do so under different circumstances. Data is everything in terms of understanding preferences, but collect the information that you need for the right reasons that reflect the intentions of the customer. I read a really great blog on Monday by Lynn Gordon of Media Online, and as she puts it, consumers engage with mobile. It's increasingly not just media and mobile strategy that need to change, it's the very essence of brand building that is contested and deeply changed by the new mobile world. And she says, winning brands apply a mobile mindset, real-time, rich and relevant to all aspects of the brand experience. And she gives a great example in Nike. Consider the evolution of Nike from a sports shoe to an empowering experience for the athlete in each of us. And I think the only thing that's perhaps on the optimistic side here, especially given my activity this week, is the pleasant idea that there's an athlete in each and every one of us. But, wider than that, your content marketing success will depend on measuring the user experience regarding the content that you're putting out to the world. Otherwise, you can't optimize for the type of audience that you have. So, in order to really be able to personalize experiences, the ability to apply conclusions from data is going to be absolutely key to getting the experience right more of the time. I think also added to that, this desire to blend the physical and digital worlds together, or perhaps rather tie together the experiences across these worlds, and this was another sort of key finding in the Netbiscuits People's Web report, is adding fuel to that fire. So this will be further driven by wearables and sensors, and it also means that data capture potential in the future will be huge, probably far too much to cope with at first. And this is why it's vital to ensure that the right data is captured for the right purposes. Now, I think in order to do this, some prioritization needs to come into effect here. So the customer's needs, I think, must be at the center of the data scheme. I'd aim for personalized interactions driven by analysis with the customer in the middle. Now, often, getting this right will have technical implications. So a horizontal organizational approach will be the most effective. It will need data to be of a consistent quality across an organization. Intelligence means getting personal. So serve the right content creative to the right person. And I think that sort of leads us nicely to the next question. What is it then that customers want? Well, we all know that people are experiencing information overload. but they do need valuable content quickly and easily. And it means being more creative about the delivery of the content. And we know as well that more creative content approaches work. For instance, there are 94% more views of articles that include visuals than those that do not. But it doesn't just stop at adding images. There are similar gains to be had from adding other content media, things like videos, slideshows, infographics, and so on. So investment in creating this content makes absolute sense. But do you need long articles and blogs to create trust? Or do your shorter articles do the trick? What about videos? Is it making sense to create 10-minute videos if only 3 minutes are watched? Or is it the case that even though more people watch videos for 3 minutes, the only conversions come from those that watch for 10 minutes? So these are just some of the factors that really come into play when thinking about how to measure actual customer engagement and what leads to a positive outcome for a business. Another example here is providing people with content that's more suited to their needs at different times of the day. So consumers are demanding more contextual content. People behave and react differently to different types of content depending on whether they're on the move, whether they're at work, or whether they're at home. Now, the chart here shows the proportion of hits that come from different platforms in terms of the total daily traffic for that specific platform. Now, the flattest line, the red line here, and therefore the most consistently used device throughout the day, is the mobile phone. Now, it shows that people are reaching for their mobile phones to surf the web from anywhere, whether that's at work, whether that's at school or at home, or while commuting. Desktop, in bright blue, on the other hand, now that has peaks and troughs throughout the day, most notably in the mid-morning, and there's another little uptick in the evenings as well, but much of the traffic actually coincides with the working day. And tablets, the purple line, that's a definite evening platform for many. Now, if we consider as well whether we are dealing with weekend or weekday traffic, we're beginning to get an idea of the context of our visitors and why they might want different content pieces. So first up, on the far left, the coffee cup symbol. So this represents our caffeine commuters, those who are visiting on weekdays in the mornings with variable bandwidth. They're our on-the-move commuters here. And we can see from the red line that the mobile phone proportionately outstrips both tablets and commuter traffic at this type of day. So the type of content that's more successful here could therefore be impacted. This audience will be easily distracted and not able to download rich images and videos all the time. So short-form content could perform much better with this group than long-form. Okay, moving across the chart now, the tie, now it's 8 AM. Desktop traffic understandably comes into play as people reach the office. There's lots of traffic coming from high-speed desktop connections. Now, in this context, many people will be searching for content that's related to their jobs. So they'll be looking for answers to problems, but they'll want to be able to access information quickly. So things like how-to guides, infographics, and charts will be popular content pieces for this audience. Meanwhile, throughout the day, there is also traffic coming from mobile phones with varying connectivity. So these are our daytime explorers shown by the compass symbol, and this group represents the people who are on the move during the day, and they're likely to be going to and from places, so they need relevant information at their fingertips very quickly, but they won't necessarily stay around long on sites. So don't be surprised to see lower levels of engagement from visitors at this time on these types of device, and a quick route to conversion may well be required here. Now, as we head towards evening, we've got the armchair. Here we can see the proportion of tablet traffic really ramping up as the purple line of tablets outstrips all the others. This group's now at home, they're relaxing, they've got high-speed connectivity, and now's the chance to really showcase the picture galleries with the impressive images and immerse people in the longer articles, high-quality videos. Levels of engagement in this group are going to be much higher, but they'll really want good quality content to match. And then overnight, all traffic sort of drops as our night owls continue to surf the web. So it's a combination of multiple factors that will impact whether customers will or indeed can engage with your content. These factors impact the user journey they may take through your site. It alters their likelihood to convert, or at what point they will convert, or whether they may switch to a different device. But one thing is certain, they'll all be looking for experiences that are much closer to their personal needs at a given time. Okay, in the last slide, we talked about making content relevant based on time of day and bandwidth speed. But people also want information that's relevant to them based on the location they're in. So if you remember the scene from the future-gazing 2002 film Minority Report, Tom Cruise stands in the department store in front of a screen. The screen recognises him and itself has a female face that informs him about what would suit his personal needs while shopping. Now, this clip can be found on YouTube, which itself has an incredibly interesting and diverse community when you read the comments associated with video clips. Some of these are normal, some eclectic, some are quite frankly unrepeatable. So we find comments such as, "This is why paranoia rates are on the rise," or the YouTube user who states that this would make him go on a shopping spree, while somebody else says it would make them go on a smashing spree. And then the insightful comment which reads, 10 years ago, they didn't think ads could be placed on the internet. Always seems impossible until you live it. And actually, there is a ring of truth to this, and here's the reason why. 63% of consumers in our survey of 6,000 told us that they would welcome special offers and other content information sent directly to their devices based on the shop that they're in. So while we may not be ready for that full immersive experience as we see in the sort of minority report scene, although actually with augmented reality on the horizon we may be closer than you think, what is certain is hyperlocation is an up-and-coming engagement requirement. In fact, VentureBeat suggests as much as a $2.3 billion mobile local targeting opportunity by 2017. So this, along with the positive feedback we've got from our survey, again, strong endorsement that people will engage if you deliver the right experience at the right time. The question is now, how do we know if we're achieving that? So this is where I think mobile combined with content marketing and analytics is combining to create the perfect storm. It's important to measure engagement against user experience. And I've used the word analytics intentionally here rather than big data. Analytics suggests conclusions rather than the impossible deluge of information we kind of associate with the concept of big data. So there's been lots of hype and buzz around big data. Marketers were, and indeed still are, under big pressures to deliver much better digital experiences to their customers. However, the great thing about more digital experiences is that it's far easier for marketers to measure the success of this media. It gives marketers the opportunity to learn so much more about how customers react to content that I think in 5 years' time, we're going to be amazed that we ever did without this information to inform our strategies. So we're at the beginning of this road where digitalization allows us all, for the first time, to easily become publishers or video producers, and as we're a feedback-hungry society, we will want to measure it and know how well we're doing. So data will underpin our assessments of how to build successful marketing strategies. It will enable us to optimize our content so that we can attract the most engaged audience. So this is an audience which learns and therefore is more likely to behave in a much more beneficial way as far as the brand is concerned. The question is how. How should the data be used to achieve what appear like watertight statements and great hypotheses? Well, I think it needs to be tied back down to the most important factor for any business. So questions should be asked of the data that answer whether the brand is serving its customers effectively. I think Melissa Parrish of Forrester made a great point when she said marketers will start contextualizing their data, drawing even richer insights. If we take this one step further and apply it to the context of mobile, then we have something really strong, something that is totally relevant and measurable in the context of content marketing. So marketers will start contextualizing their data. It's this part that's key to unlocking the success, and the rise of mobile tech in the hands of consumers gives us more opportunity to contextualize data from consumers than ever before. So data is our friend, and let's have a look now at how data might relate to the content marketing world. So right at the top here of the 8 key goals for content marketing as agreed by marketers in this B2C content marketing survey, so in joint first position in fact alongside customer loyalty is customer engagement at 88%. It's followed closely by brand awareness at 87%. And for marketers, it's much ahead of sales, which then drops to 77%. As we mentioned, if we get engagement right, it makes sense that actually sales should follow anyway. So if we're placing engagement so highly in the list here, in the rankings, the way in which we measure engagement needs some thinking about. We're dedicating money and resource to it, so are we getting the most out of this? Well, let's start first of all by considering what content we might produce, because in actual fact, the content type will answer how is best to measure it. Now, first of all, the types of different content, particularly in the multi-screen world that are available to marketers today, is huge. Now, I've selected a mere range of examples from across the board, in fact, even outside of mobile for this grid above. It's not exhaustive, but it nicely illustrates how it can range from everything from photo galleries through to videos, ebooks, infographics, community forums, quizzes, interactive pages, SlideShare, presentations, and so on and so on. In short, there's a lot of diversity, and this diversity adds complexity. And we have this already in a world which has become hugely complex due to the multi-screen phenomenon. And I think it also fully explains the results that we had when we look into the stats from our People's Web report. Not all content works efficiently on all devices, and that's annoying. That video that won't play, the PDF that won't download, the link that's too small to click. It's no wonder then that consumers express many frustrations, and in big proportions as well. Speed of download for the second year running remains the top issue on the mobile web. And that's not surprising, given that we're trying to put more and more content, and richer content too, onto our web pages. Almost 1/3 say that they find that sites are often or very often too slow to use. And these customers will go elsewhere. But this is not the only issue. 95% of respondents say that they have found it too difficult to enter information, with 30% saying, again, this is an issue either often or very often. And again, this is a horrible experience, and we've all been there trying to pinch and squeeze the screen so that we can get to the drop-down box to pop in our credit card details, for instance. 95% say that they found it too difficult to find the information they wanted on a mobile site. Again, almost 30% saying that this was an issue often or very often. So we need to do better than this if we're to maximise the value we can get from all the great content marketing pieces that we're creating. Okay, so there's a little snapshot of what's going wrong today and some of the issues that cause frustration when engaging with mobile sites. So with that in mind, here are some practical examples for improving web traffic and customer engagement with content marketing campaigns across any screen. So number one, track highest performing referrer content. So this would look at measuring whether the audience for your content is originating from advertising channels, from SEO, or from your social media presence. But more importantly, are the audiences from these channels of varying quality in terms of their likelihood to convert, based on how they reached your website content across multiple screen categories? So consider audience within the framework of the mobile user context. Now this will be much more accurate for segmenting and targeting marketing campaigns. Number two, measure conversion goals on web content. As I mentioned, this would link back to the type of content being measured, so from that previous slide. But for video, for instance, it would include things like the time a customer spends watching the video. If it's an article, you can find out if they were really interested in the content by checking how far they read, so the scroll depth on a page. If it's an asset, of course, the number of downloads is important. But critically, it's important to measure this across the mobile user experience. So again, thinking about how things like location, time of day, and bandwidth speeds might impact the metrics such as downloads, page views, time on page, and so on. So that leads me nicely to point three. Once you're measuring conversion goals, it makes it much easier to plan to create the most effective content for an engaged audience. So this can be achieved by developing personal content based on mobile user personas. Some of those examples I illustrated earlier. And also by segmenting factors such as screen, bandwidth speed, location, and more. And this will enable you to concentrate on the content items that give the best return on investment for your specific audience. And of course, finally, don't just measure where things are going right, but again, remember to take into account where things are not so successful. And this is also a key part of the continual optimization process. So number 4 here, identify reasons for bounce. But again, make sure that it takes into account that mobile user context. We know so much more about user intent now than we did, say, in the day of desktop web browsing. So this contextual information will provide much better answers to why a customer might bounce. So when thinking about what reports to run, I think it makes sense to think about it in the context of how the measurement contributes to positive business outcomes. So far, analytics has been the most effective application for measuring business outcomes of creative programs, at least according to this Corn Ferry survey, with 39% here agreeing. So this, again, really encouraging. But also, and it keeps cropping up, personalization here sits at almost 24%, and both of these are extremely significant in the field of content marketing. So if we pull all of these trends back together now, we begin to get a feel for how 2015 should shape up. At the moment, we're in the stages of working out how we can collect more, and indeed more accurate data. At recent events I've attended, there's still much talk about the potential rise of a chief data officer. I think in the coming months we'll see this data being applied in a much more customer-centric way. In terms of content marketing, organisations need to identify what data sets will give them the clues about how customers will react and behave. Their digital content will provide some of the most comprehensive answers to this question, I think. By measuring a customer's engagement with the value content, organisations can much more clearly identify whether they're serving or actually failing their customers at the customer's moment of need. Also, of course, marketers are under pressure to demonstrate ever better return on investment. Now, as data is gathered, it will start to enable marketers to actually plan for better content marketing programs based on the lessons and data provided by previous campaigns. So the data provided should enable marketers to start stitching together information that's able to demonstrate the return on investment of strategies such as content marketing or indeed mobile campaigns. That said, it is imperative that organisations consider different metrics for measuring success and also be flexible around this. There'll be many benefits of content marketing or mobile strategy, and all of these leading to softer ROIs as well for an organisation. But these soft ROIs, such as increased audience loyalty in an otherwise disloyal world, these will be the ones that really make or break organisations and dictate which ones make the cut over the next decade and which don't. Now, I think it's only when we get these blocks into place that we can start thinking about using analysis to drive more automated processes. If the analytical foundations are not laid down in the first place, then automated processes will fail. So it's essential that the steps are taken in the right order. So in my view, big data has one major task. It should empower the marketer. It should enable the marketer to be able to communicate what's needed to make the content marketing strategy work and work well. And then in terms, if we move to the right of the screen now, in terms of the impact of mobile on marketing strategy, the proliferation of different devices which measure features, along with the immediacy of these devices, means that we have to think much more creatively about the content types in order to attract attention. So there needs to be a greater variety of content out there, but without running the risk of breaking the experience for devices that can't support the richest media. This means that, and I keep returning to it, we've got to use every clue available to ensure that we get the right content to the right device at the right time in order to deliver an experience that does feel highly personalised. So I think in the first half of 2015, we'll see more examples of organisations adopting this approach. We're already seeing the rollout of some of this theory. Those of you in the UK may have noticed the BBC, for instance, is rolling out new websites. Now, the technical information that's related to that says this new design emphasises imagery compared with the previous design. Those images have been optimised for your device and bandwidth, so the page loading speed is never compromised while still providing exceptional image quality for when your connection speed is able to handle the bigger images. Now also, and I think more in the second half of the year, we'll start to see wearables becoming more interesting. It'll still be early days for the tech, but we'll start to see, as it begins to proliferate, how the seamless connection of the physical brand presence and its digital presence becomes even more important. Now, catering for this is probably going to be one of the biggest challenges for all organisations over the next 10 years. And I think we've seen this most in retail so far. Again, from Lynn Gordon's blog, she says, many have explored brands online before shopping in bricks and mortar stores. How many times have you checked online reviews before buying, compared prices online before going to the checkout, or considered a friend's Facebook recommendation when making your own brand choice? The real world of retail, the virtual world of social recommendation, exploration, and comparison are seamless parts of one brand experience for brands that are winning in a connected world. So wearables, combined with sensors, that will intensify this still further as people look for more convenient ways for interaction. Now, Only once we've got these aspects in place can marketers really begin to plan for a much larger scale but far more accurate automation of processes, something which perhaps blends predictive analysis with predicting future customer behaviour, and all the while targeting a more individual, personal experience for the customer. To begin with, time of day, device type, bandwidth, location, and hyperlocation, so all of the clues that come from mobile devices, will undoubtedly be a huge factor in this. Location, that will come first, as it's the most developed at the moment. However, automation will become manifest in the context of mobile, especially when we add in wearables plus advanced sensors into the mix. So the case for getting the wrong content at the wrong time to a customer will become increasingly more difficult for brands to answer. So by the end of the year, and perhaps more likely the beginning of next year, we'll see some more sophisticated and automated personalization strategies from some brands. But of course, you can't instruct automation until you understand how content actually performs. This could be the beginning of what I'm calling at the moment the automated hyper-personalization. Anyhow, the good news for content marketing and marketers more generally is that we're heading towards a world in which we can be closer to the customer than ever, and if we get the experience right based on that, we'll be able to build for a more engaged audience than ever before as well. So, in summary then, just the three key points. The combination of mobile, multi-screen and social is dramatically changing marketing. But the good news is that these megatrends create the perfect backdrop for successful content marketing strategies. And if we're spending all this money on content marketing, then measuring the success of customer engagement and UX will become the foundation for optimizing future customer experiences. So, thank you for joining us. I will just take a moment now to review, collate any feedback and questions that we have at this stage. So yeah, we have a couple of questions that have come through. First of all, big data seems like a big concept that frightens a lot of people. How can marketers break this concept down and understand what it means on a daily basis? So, yeah, great question. I think it's the term there, big data, that causes the problem. So in mobile, for instance, I think of it more in terms of perhaps using data that's been made available by mobile that's useful in some way. I think also perhaps there's too much expectation that we need to capture every single data point from every available source, and this makes the data big and then it gets scary. So I think it needs to be approached perhaps on a project-by-project basis, the emphasis being on prioritizing which bits of data will help in a specific project. Also, another question here, what new devices and technologies should marketers be thinking about when they consider their online experience for the next 5 years? So it also ties in with another question that we've had, which is, can you share your thoughts around augmented reality usage with mobile devices? So the first part of the question then, the kind of trends and how that relates to online experience in the next 5 years, I think it's a tough one because it will vary by vertical. So, for instance, if you're an entertainment provider, probably the smart TV platform is much more urgent than if you're perhaps in another sector. Then if you think about wearables, well, that's really going to impact health and leisure first before it sort of touches other sectors. So I'd probably want to look at that in a different way. I'd want to make sure, first of all, that I'm able to gather the customer data about these platforms in advance, so then I can start thinking, okay, what's the right decision for my specific audience? Because of course, all of those audiences are very different. In terms of the augmented reality piece, I think in that instance, again, we're at very early stages, and it's interesting that at all the events, all the major events, there's been a big emphasis around that, and certainly, you know, when you look at the big guns in the market, it seems to be that that's what they're placing their bets on at the moment. With regards to that, I still think that we're still quite a long way off from that being accepted as something that consumers really want to engage in. It's further ahead than, say, perhaps the idea of smart glasses and that concept. But certainly, when you sort of think about people and the feedback that they give around augmented reality, we're not quite there yet. Again, I think that in terms of that, we need to really think about, again, gathering that data to say, okay, if we know that people are engaging in augmented reality, again, when is the right time for my audience to start thinking about what I need to do as a brand to relate to those trends taking place? It's definitely one to watch. I think more in 2016 than we have for this year, so we'll be keeping that very, very closely on the radar at the moment. Also, another question, what are your views on the future of tablets and their role as compared to smartphones? So this kind of relates to the point that we made early on in the presentation, where we're also seeing that emergence as well of the phablet devices. So as far as tablets are concerned, I think definitely, we're seeing that trend towards having that device that sort of sits in the middle of the two. Again, I don't think that's right for everyone. I still think there's a place for tablets. And as I say, when we look at the usage of tablets, it's still predominantly people like to turn to their larger tablet when they're at home. So they're kind of like a less mobilized mobile device compared to the phablet. I think the key thing around that is particularly, and again we see it in markets where the mobile device, so the smartphone, is actually used more often as the primary access point for the internet. That's where we sort of really at the moment see that the phablet space growing at the moment. I think what's interesting in both instances is so in both of those cases, it's really demonstrating how the need for context and understanding the context in which a user is using these devices is becoming hugely important. I've got another question. In your opinion, what should content marketers consider before anything else this year? With regards to this one, I think that's a good question. Again, really how to make the most of any budget that they're going to spend on content marketing. I talked a lot about the different possible content types during the presentation, but I think the key thing is a lot of this can often be repurposed from the original source content. So getting that content pipeline in place and then being able to fire it out in multiple directions is absolutely key. Okay, at the moment we've got no further questions. If you didn't get the chance to ask the question you wanted, please do feel free to reach out to us at Netbiscuits. We're keen to establish an ongoing dialogue around these themes, so any feedback you have is much appreciated. So thank you for joining us today. We'll be running a series of webinars throughout the rest of 2015 in which we'll look at some of these trends in more depth. So this will include a more detailed look at aspects such as more personalization, demonstrating ROI with analytics, hyperlocation, as well as, of course, a summary of all the events taking place in the mobile market that will shape and impact the future of marketing. Again, feel free to reach out to us with any comments or questions. That concludes today's webinar. Thanks again for joining us, and you can now disconnect when ready. Thank you.